If human equality is to be forever averted, if the high, as we have called them, are to keep their places permanently, then the prevailing mental condition must be controlled insanity. George Orwell published 1984 on June 8th, 1949, and when it was published, it was met with much praise and much criticism. For example, when it was published, it was banned in the Soviet Union. Orwell was open about his disdain for the Stalinist regime in Soviet Union. Instead, he favored democratic socialist ideas. Class consciousness is the awareness of one's place in a system of social classes, especially in Marxist terms, as it relates to the class struggle. It's a critical theme in 1984. The novel illustrates a major power imbalance between the ruling states and its citizens. This theme also holds relevance in contemporary society. Without class consciousness, people might not be able to see the economic and social problems within their country. In 1984, you are greeted with the main character, Winston Smith. They are set in a country called Oceania, which is in control of the Americas, the UK, Oceania, of course, and in the south of Africa. Winston works in the records department of the Ministry of Truth. During a 2 minutes of hate, he made eye contact with O'Brien. He believed that he was someone also against the party. Winston at the time of this was only having small thoughts like that and wasn't really thinking about being against the party until around that moment with O'Brien. O'Brien is a high-ranking inter-party member who initially appeared to be an ally to Winston. However, he betrayed them by pretending to be a part of the Brotherhood and getting them sent to the Mini-Love, or the Ministry of Love, which is where they would deal with things like thought crime, which would be having thoughts of things like dissent of the party or loving somebody. The party in the end wanted full control. Julia, the love interest of the book, was a respectable person belonging to the outer party. Julia and Winston began some sort of relationship with one another and ended up having their hatred towards the party grow when they were talking to one another. This is probably why the party hated loving relationships. Major events in the novel include Winston's growing disdain with the party and his growing acts of rebellion, the relationship with Julia and their efforts to stay away from the surveillance, their eventual capture by the thought police led by O'Brien, the interrogation and torture that Winston goes through designed to make him loyal to the party and betray Julia. The final major event is when Winston gives in and becomes brainwashed into loving the party and losing his individuality again. The book also talks about perpetual wars that they have. However, the country they're at war with gets changed basically all the time, and they just gaslight the whole population into believing it. This perpetual war is to keep the populations of their countries poor, to take their mind off the internal issues in the country and look externally and hating another country rather than the party that just takes care of you. The inner party is an elite ruling class that has access to special privileges that the proles, the workers of Oceania, and the outer party do not have. They have access to things like servants, and they get to drink things like wine. The inner party is like the oligarchical society that we live in the US. Of course, the case is a little different as it is private business owners who are better off than the rest of the society. Outer party members are watched tirelessly to see if they slip up and don't follow the orders of the inner party. Proles are working class people, very ignorant to what's even going on above them. They aren't educated enough to have the ability to think about things like class consciousness. Instead, they're constantly infighting. In the book, there's a lot of omnipresent surveillance from the telescreens to the thought police and even just to the big brother posters that seems to be looking at you from any angle. In the book, the party creates something called newspeak. It's this thing where they take topics or ideas in English and turn them into a new word. This is to limit the amount of thought that the proles and the outer party can have. Party would use propaganda tools to rewrite the past, to control the proles. This is to make it seem like they are in a better spot now than they were compared to where they used to be. Even if it was a blatant lie, the proles in the outer party had to believe it as true because if they didn't, they would be labeled as thought criminals and would be sent off to a labor camp. Class consciousness is crucial for recognizing power struggles because if we don't know there was a power struggle, like the proles, they won't revolt. However, when you have that class consciousness, you're able to see what's wrong with society and you would be able to find other people who see it too, and then you're starting to be able to change society to what you would really want it to be. In 1984, it would be wanting to be a part of a more just and fair run society where the proles see a true growth in their standard of living and not just being controlled and lied to like they are in the book. The party suppresses class consciousness within the book by limiting what the proles are taught. When they are young, they are being indoctrinated with ideas like the party created airplanes and helicopters. They are also indoctrinated with things like that life was much worse off when life was under the capitalists and how they are much better off under the regime of the Big Brother. This power structure is very similar to the DPRK, where they simply indoctrinate their children to being blind followers of their Juche communist regime. Orwell wrote this book as a warning to the dangers of totalitarianism, loss of personal freedoms, and the manipulation of truth. All of these things feed into the party's way of subverting class consciousness. Today, we are seeing many problems with the rise of oligarchic power imbalances in our society. You could go as far to say that we are living in one now, but that's a story for another day. However, there are many parallels from this book in our modern life. We have people living in a society not seeing the power imbalances in our economic world and just working on like nothing's a problem. But then we are starting to see people begin to see those imbalances and begin to talk about them and think of ways that would make us better off. There are people noticing and protesting against neoliberal policies that exacerbated income inequality, furthering the class divide. You have things like the student loan debt crisis that are all things bringing light to the classes of the country and also making it worse. In conclusion, 1984 serves as a stark reminder of the importance of class consciousness. Recognizing and challenging power structures is vital for building a more equitable society. By learning from Orwell's warnings, we can better address contemporary issues and strive for a fair future. Confluencism is a socio-economic philosophy that emphasizes worker cooperatives and democratic ownership. It's rooted in the belief that businesses should be owned and managed by the workers themselves rather than a small group of shareholders or executives. This structure ensures that profits are distributed more equitably and decisions are democratically, giving workers a direct say in their working conditions and the direction of the enterprise. Confluencism fosters class consciousness by highlighting disparities inherent in traditional capitalist systems. It empowers workers through collective ownership and decision making, encouraging them to recognize their role within the broader economic system. By participating in cooperatives, workers are more aware of their rights, the value of their labor, and the power structures that typically exploit them. This awareness leads to a stronger, unified workforce that can advocate for fair treatment and better working conditions. In 1984, the oppressive regime maintains control through surveillance, propaganda, and manipulation. The party suppresses individuality and promotes a false sense of unity, ensuring that the masses remain subservient. In stark contrast, Confluencism offers an equitable democratic alternative. It promotes transparency, collective decision-making, and equitable distribution of resources. Instead of a top-down approach where power is concentrated in the hands of the few, Confluencism supports a bottom-up structure where workers have a say in the direction and operation of their business. Confluencism can address contemporary issues like economic inequality and corporate exploitation. In a world where wealth is increasingly concentrated in the hands of the few, worker cooperatives provide a model for fair and equitable economic structures. By empowering workers and promoting democratic ownership, Confluencism helps to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. ensuring that everyone has a fair stake in the economy. This model also reduces exploitation as workers are more likely to make decisions that benefit their collective well being rather than focusing solely on profit. The Community Wealth Fund plays a crucial role in building capital to support workers. By providing financial resources, the CWF helps workers invest in cooperative businesses. This investment not only enables the establishment of new cooperatives, but also strengthens existing ones. As cooperatives grow and thrive, they create a more resilient and inclusive economy, offering a viable alternative to traditional corporate models. The fluctuating ownership model is an innovative approach within Confluencism that allows for dynamic ownership structures. In this model, the ownership of a business can shift based on the contributions and investment of workers. This flexibility ensures that ownership remains equitable and responsive to the needs of the workforce. By adopting this model, businesses can continuously adapt to changing economic conditions and worker priorities, fostering a more democratic and sustainable economic system. Transforming economic and political structures. The Community Wealth Fund is central to transforming economic and political structures. By mobilizing capital for worker cooperatives, the CWF empowers individuals and communities to take control of their economic destinies. This transformation is not just economic, but also political, as it promotes a shift towards democratic ownership and decision-making. The CWF helps bridge the gap between traditional economic systems and Confluencism's goal, providing the necessary resources for establishing and maintaining cooperative enterprises. By promoting collective ownership and democratic control, the CWF facilitates a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources. This, in turn, challenges the existing power structures and advocates for fair labor practices and social injustice. As cooperatives grow and influence political agendas, they can push for reforms that prioritize well-being of workers and communities. By adopting the principles of Confluencism, society can prevent the dystopian futures envisioned in 1984. The emphasis on democratic ownership and equitable distribution promotes a fair and more inclusive economy, reducing the likelihood of authoritarian regimes gaining control. Confluencism focuses on transparency and worker empowerment. They would act as a safeguard against the manipulation and oppression that characterize totalitarian systems. By fostering a more just and equitable society, Confluencism offers a hopeful alternative to the bleak world of 1984.